Real stories, real Steck voice. April 8th, 1943. 27,000 feet above ruined France. The sky is a frozen sea, pale blue, streaked with contrails like scars. A formation of silver aircraft rumbles across it, their massive radial engines growling like thunder caged in steel. They are the new American fighters, Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, heavy, round, and to the German pilots below, almost comical. In the cockpit of his Messerschmitt Bf-109G, Lieutenant Hans Keller squints upward. "Schau mal an," he laughs over the radio. "Look at them, fat pigs with wings." His wingman joins in, confident that such bulky machines could never match the agility of the Luftwaffe's interceptors. But at 27,000 feet, Lieutenant Charles or Chuck Eaton of the 56th Fighter Group isn't laughing. His gloved hand tightens on the throttle as his headset crackles. "Bandits, 10 high!" The sky suddenly comes alive with motion. Keller and his comrades roll in from above, sunlight flashing off their canopies like knives. Eaton's Thunderbolt trembles under the strain as he yanks back on the stick. The heavy aircraft doesn't climb sharply. It heaves as if dragging a mountain behind it. Tracers whistle past his canopy, glowing red and orange. "So this is it," he mutters. Then he pushes the nose down. The P-47 roars into a dive, the altimeter spinning madly. Keller follows, grinning, until his own aircraft begins to shake violently. The Messerschmitt's frame screams under the pressure, nearing structural collapse. The Thunderbolt, built like a flying tank, holds steady. At 500 miles per hour, Eaton pulls the trigger. 8 Browning .5 caliber machine guns erupt in unison, a storm of fire that slices through the sky. Keller's laughter dies as rounds rip through his left wing, shredding metal like paper. The Messerschmitt explodes into flame, vanishing in a blink. For the first time, German pilots realized the flying milk jug isn't slow. It's unstoppable in a dive. And those 8 machine guns, they don't just fire, they devour. Eaton levels out, the engine howling. "Thunderbolts, form up," he says, calmly, the faint smile of a man who knows he's just rewritten the rules of the sky. High above the French countryside, the P-47 has earned its name. The Germans would remember it and fear it for the rest of the war. Months before that first fateful encounter over France, in a bustling factory in Farmingdale, New York, the Republic Aviation Corporation was racing against time. Engineers and draftsmen crowded over blueprints, pencils snapping as revisions piled up. At the center of it all stood Alexander Kartveli, the Georgian-born designer whose bold vision defied conventional aircraft logic. Kartveli believed that speed and survivability would win the air war, not elegance. The P-47 was his answer, a brute of a machine powered by the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, one of the largest radial engines ever mounted on a single-seat fighter. While German aircraft relied on inline liquid-cooled engines, delicate and vulnerable, the Thunderbolt's massive air-cooled radial could take punishment and still roar home. When test pilots first climbed into the P-47, many were skeptical. It was enormous, over 10,000 pounds fully loaded, nearly double the weight of a Spitfire or a Messerschmitt. "Feels like flying a safe," one pilot joked. The cockpit was roomy, but visibility was poor, and its climb rate left much to be desired. But Kartveli's team had built more than just a fighter. They'd built a survivor. The thick armor plating, self-sealing fuel tanks, and redundant control systems meant pilots could take hits that would down almost any other aircraft. When paired with the turbo supercharger tucked deep in its belly, the Thunderbolt could climb to altitudes above 30,000 feet and dive faster than any German plane in service. Soon, the man of the 56th Fighter Group, led by Colonel Hubert Zemke, began to understand what they were sitting on. Zemke, a no-nonsense tactician, recognized that the P-47 wasn't meant to twist and turn with nimble enemy fighters. Its strength lay in its power, its stamina, and its firepower. Under his command, the Wolfpack developed a deadly strategy. Hit from high altitude, dive hard, unleash a blistering burst from those 850 caliber guns, and climb back into the heavens before the enemy could react. No turning contests, no wasted chances, pure, calculated destruction. Back in Germany, Luftwaffe intelligence reported the new American fighter as zu schwer, zu langsam, too heavy, too slow. The German pilots laughed in briefings, confident their Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs would dance circles around this overgrown monster. But they hadn't yet met the Jug, not in the hands of Zemke's men, not when its guns were singing. Real stories, real Steck voice. By the spring of 1943, the 56th Fighter Group, the Wolfpack, was ready for war. Stationed at Halesworth Airfield in Suffolk, England, rows of P-47 Thunderbolts stood glinting in the morning fog, their propellers turning lazily as ground crews prepped for another mission. The pilots, young men barely in their 20s, sipped black coffee, joked about the weather, and secretly wondered whether their new Jug could really stand up to the Luftwaffe's best. When the briefing came through, escort bombers bound for Rouen, the air buzzed with tension. The mission? Protect the B-17 flying fortresses as they struck German targets in occupied France. The P-47s would provide high-altitude cover, intercepting any German fighters before they could shred the bombers to pieces. As the Thunderbolts climbed into the pale English sky, engines roaring in unison, Zemke's voice crackled over the radio. "Wolfpack, keep it tight. Remember what I told you. Dive, fire, climb. Don't dogfight. We own the high ground." Minutes later, the radio erupted with German chatter. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s screamed in from above, diving straight into the bomber formations. The first real test had begun. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, one of Zemke's most daring pilots, spotted a pair of 190s cutting across his formation. He rolled his P-47 over and dove after them, the world turning into a blur of blue and silver. The Thunderbolt shuddered but held steady, its massive frame slicing through the air like a falling hammer. At 400 miles per hour, Johnson opened fire. The roar of 8 Brownings shook the sky, and tracers tore through the Focke-Wulf's fuselage. The German plane disintegrated, leaving a trail of black smoke spiraling into the clouds. But there was no time to celebrate. Another German fighter appeared on Johnson's tail, riddling his aircraft with cannon fire. Bullets punched through the fuselage, shattered his canopy, and tore into his engine. The Jug groaned but didn't die. His controls were nearly frozen, his fuel lines punctured, and his oxygen system destroyed. Yet somehow the Jug stayed aloft. He limped back across the channel, smoke pouring from the engine, landing at Halesworth with over 200 holes in his airframe. Mechanics stared in disbelief. Any other fighter would have been a flaming wreck. When reporters later asked him how he survived, Johnson smiled. "Because I was flying a Thunderbolt." The laughter from the Luftwaffe was gone. By summer's end, they had begun referring to the P-47 by a new name whispered in radio static and frustration: Der Koloss im Himmel, the Colossus in the sky.
Real stories, real Steck voice. By 1944, the P-47 Thunderbolt was no longer an experiment. It was a terror of the skies. Entire Luftwaffe squadrons began avoiding combat when Thunderbolts appeared on radar. From high above France, Belgium, and Germany, they swept down like silver predators, leaving trails of smoke and destruction in their wake. Colonel Hub Zemke's Wolfpack had now become the top-scoring American fighter group in Europe. The tactics he'd perfected, the dive, strike, and climb, were being adopted by other units across the 8th Air Force. What began as a lumbering curiosity had become the backbone of Allied air superiority. Every pilot who flew the Jug had a story that bordered on impossible. Lieutenant Francis Gabby Gabreski, Zemke's quiet but lethal ace, racked up 28 aerial victories, often firing only short, controlled bursts. He described the P-47 as a flying fortress for one man. When enemy tracers stitched across his fuselage, he trusted the armor and pressed the trigger harder. But it wasn't just in the air that the Thunderbolt made its mark. As the Allies prepared for D-Day, the P-47's role evolved. With drop tanks and bomb racks fitted beneath its wings, the Jug became a devastating fighter-bomber. Armed with rockets, bombs, and its 8.5 caliber guns, it shredded German armor, trains, and troop convoys with brutal efficiency. In the days following the Normandy invasion, P-47s operated from temporary airstrips carved into French fields. Pilots like Captain Walker Bud Marchrin flew multiple sorties a day, swooping low to destroy enemy columns retreating toward the interior. From above, the countryside erupted in smoke and flame. The once ridiculed milk jug had become the very definition of Allied dominance, a flying hammer pounding the crumbling Reich. Even German ground troops, once indifferent to air attacks, learned to fear the distinctive growl of the P-47's engine. Soldiers would whisper warnings to each other, "Donde Bosen kommt?" The Thunderbolt is coming. And it always did. By late 1944, as American forces advanced toward the Rhine, Luftwaffe pilots faced a grim choice: engage the Thunderbolts and risk annihilation, or retreat and abandon the skies. Many chose the latter. For the men who flew it, the P-47 was more than just an aircraft. It was salvation. Pilots returned to base with their wings shredded, oil streaming from holes big enough to fit a fist, and yet they landed, over and over again. It was, as Zemke once said, the plane that brought my boys home. And for the Luftwaffe pilots who once laughed at it, the sight of that stubby, powerful silhouette against the sun became something they would never forget. The moment the sky itself began to roar with American thunder.